Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Talent Talks by Encora Jobs. My name is Alejandra, and today we have a very important topic for you. We're going to talk about the art of interviewing, technical and personal preparation, a subject that's very important for all of us. Our guest is Franshezco. He's going to talk about this topic with us. He's an organizational psychologist and also a tech recruiter. So, welcome, Franshezco. We also want to let you know that you can leave your comments and questions in the chat below. We're going to answer them as soon as possible. So, welcome again, Franshezco.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. And to present myself, I am Franshezco Lliuyacc. I'm a technical recruiter, but I'm also a psychologist. So over the years, I've been able to integrate my experience and being able to talk with a whole bunch of developers and essentially kind of extrapolate a lot of information on the difficulties that they've had, with technical interviewing. So, based on that, I've been able to create this presentation and help out a lot of people, to be able to communicate in a different way, to be able to feel more comfortable in different interviews. And throughout the entire hiring process, make it a little bit more enjoyable and a little bit more fun. So with that, we're going to get into the art of technical interviewing, sorry. Okay. Well, like I said, Franshezco Lliuyacc, technical recruiter. This is the art of IT interviewing, technical and personal preparation. Next slide. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's talk about the content, what we're going to talk about today. We're going to get a little bit into what is a technical interview. We're going to go into how to prepare for a technical interview and some qualities we're going to be able to demonstrate during the technical interview. At the end, we're going to have a space for questions and answers. And overall, it's going to be a great experience. Okay, so let's start off. What's a technical interview? Well, a technical interview is essentially a space in which you're going to have a conversation with someone. That is it in its core. And this meeting, you're going to be able to demonstrate your technical expertise in your preferred tech stack, because I know all developers have a different tech stack, through a very dynamic interview. This is going to be achieved through a variety of mechanisms. They're normally done through coding assignments, through hypothetical situations or case simulations, or theoretical and practical knowledge. In any case, the interview is going to decide on which one to use according to the situation, according to the level of experience that you've already previously exposed. But for every single situation, what we're going to be doing is communicating. At the end of the day, there are different ways of communicating. For example, in a coding assignment, you're going to want to communicate the logic of your code. As far as I understand, I'm not an engineer, but as far as I understand, every single line of code has a logic behind it, a reason as to why you write it, to be able to solve a problem or to be able to create a function. So essentially communicating the logic of your code will create that perception of expertise. In the case of hypothetical situations or case simulations, this is going to be more focused on your experience. They're going to be asking different situations, case simulations, and they're going to be asking what you would do. And normally, well, if you're basically up to the challenge, you were probably going to have these situations already previously done in your experience. So these case simulations essentially are just repeating your experience and trying to frame it in a different way, okay? And then the theoretical practical knowledge. This is extremely important because theoretical practical knowledge is going to be the base, the toolkit, the mental information that you're going to need to be able to act upon any new situation. It's essentially fluid knowledge and fluid intelligence, and that is the core of what you're going to be able to use, okay? So that's a technical interview. Essentially, it's a meeting in which you're going to demonstrate your expertise through various hypothetical mechanisms depending on the interviewer, okay? All right, so let's get into how to prepare for a technical interview. In general, prepping for a technical interview, or any interview really, isn't just getting all of the knowledge ready. It's also about having a clear idea of how to communicate that knowledge in the most attractive way. A lot of that communication will be very explicit. It's going to be essentially verbally. But in this part, we're also going to explore how to implicitly communicate certain aspects of our experience. And we're going to be playing around with certain cognitive biases, a lot of psychological lingo, but essentially there are ways in which you can communicate certain things without necessarily having to say it. So that's what we're going to get into right now. We're going to be looking at different approaches. We're going to start off with a technical approach, okay? So in general, the technical approach is essentially building a technical interview toolkit. This is going to be a mental infrastructure based on your awareness of your experience and the knowledge that you have around the side of software, the side of the software development cycle that you're on, whether you be a QA, DevOps, whether you be a software developer, front end or a back end. You are going to have to know the solid, like you're going to have to be able to kind of summarize your experiences and the knowledge base that you want to be able to expose beforehand so that you can have this at hand as a toolkit. Okay, so there are different ways to be able to get this ready. Let's start off with the technical skills assessment. Essentially, it's asking yourself, where are my strong suits and where are my weak suits as far as my technical skills? Okay. So it's going to be the skills and competencies that you offer in relation to the provided job description position. You're going to have to contrast between your skills and what the job description asks. For example, a front-end developer, they might ask for an Angular developer with experience in Material UI, an experience with Angular Material, with experience in CSS, XML, and so on. Just spitballing here. The idea here is, based on that job description, based on the responsibilities that you might ask, you're going to have to keep in mind, in the entirety of your experience, what part of all of this am I kind of, essentially aligning myself with in the job description? And also, what don't I have in this job description? Okay. So that's extremely important because, first of all, you're going to want to highlight what you do have and then bring the rest of your experience, the experience that you won't necessarily have, trying to bring other parts of your experience into light to be able to show and demonstrate potential. But we'll get into that a little bit later, okay? Then a portfolio of highlights. These are the experiences that you've had in various projects that you've worked on, whether it's you've had experiences being in preview team lead, whether you've been promoted to staff technical lead, etc. These are going to be situations in which these are the highlights in your career, highlight situations in which you've been promoted to be able to be involved in the technical architecture of a situation, or if you're stuck doing maintenance or so on. Essentially, creating the highlights of your experience is going to be extremely important because that's what you're going to be using. That's the selling material, you know what I'm saying? So that's extremely important. Then the theory of everything. The greater your theoretical knowledge of key aspects of the software development process, the better, because essentially this is the vocabulary, this is your lingo, this is what you're going to be able to use to express yourself. The more you know, the more fluid the information that comes out is going to be. So essentially try and before going into the interview, review the theoretical aspects because that's going to be extremely important. Becoming a code genius. Your strategies and approach when dealing with an algorithm, data structure problems, and other coding challenges is extremely important. As I mentioned before, being able to explain the logic of your code is also extremely important, but without knowing that strategy and your general approach, you're going to have a hard time communicating that. So practice is extremely important. And here are some pages that you can use for practice. HackerRank, Algo Expert, InterviewBit, or FreeCodeCamp are excellent pages to be able to practice your coding skills. Okay, so going on to the next approach, the fake it until you make it approach. This is the part in which we're going to be looking into that implicit communication of your experience. Exposing your knowledge as if you're already part of the company creates the perception of competence. And there are many different ways in which we can create the perception of competence without actually saying. So here's some ways that you can prepare. You can do a little bit of company research. If you're going to be going for a specific job interview, you can discuss the research with your company's culture, the values, the products, and the recent achievements, and explain how your skills align with their needs and goals. This is extremely important because hypothetically, if you're going into a financial advisor industry or the finance industry or the big data industry, a lot of that is going to be involved hypothetically with data security and so on. So being able to expose that in that hypothetical situation is going to be extremely important. That's why it's also super important to research the company beforehand. Okay. Then role-specific preparation. The idea is to tailor your discussion to the specific requirements of the job that you're interviewing for. So if the role involves specific tools or methodologies, like I mentioned before, you have to be prepared to talk about that with your experience in hand. And then finally, closing the deal. This is going to be the strategies for effectively closing the interview. such as asking questions about the next steps, expressing your interest in the role, and sending up a follow-up thank you email. So here I'd like to do a little bit of an emphasis as far as this last part, because questions are going to be extremely important. In every single interview that anyone's ever had, there's always going to be a final space for questions. And this is where we're really going to be able to create that perception. With every single question that you make to another person, this question creates an inference. Essentially, the way that we process information is if we're asked a question, inside our mind, to be able to respond that question, we make ourselves this another question. Essentially, why is this person asking this question? What is the context needed to be able to respond to this question? And so that's extremely important, because you can essentially, with your questions, you can create a perception of competence. Now, typically when I coach my candidates, I give them 3 types of questions to be able to ask. First, starting with the role, going into role-specific questions. What aspects of the role are extremely important to you? So in your case, a software developer, if you're going to be asking what's the tech stack, what is the communication style, maybe what code repositories they're using, and so on. These are going to be extremely important, because what perception does that create? It creates the perception of, okay, this person is asking me about very important aspects of our day-to-day life as in this project or in this company. And this is going to create the perception of, hey, this person is basically acting like he's already inside, he or she is acting like he's already inside the company and they're already working for us. Okay, so that's extremely important. That's that first set of questions is extremely important. Then we have the next set of questions, which is going to go a little bit more general into the company's culture. So this is where company research is going to be extremely important, because asking the interviewer about their day-to-day lives is going to be so crucial to be able to create a perception of, oh, hey, you know what, this person can connect to me. It's creating the perception that this person cares about what's the day-to-day life looking like inside this company and working in this company. Okay, extremely important. And then in a final set of questions, you're going to be attacking directly to the interviewer, essentially asking them a little bit more personal questions related to their job, related to their intervention in this role, and asking them maybe what does the ideal candidate look like? What's the best interview that they've had so far? And what you can do, or if they consider you to be an ideal candidate for this. These types of questions can be so powerful in creating different perceptions, and also essentially kind of ensuring that you as a person, or you as an idea or a concept, are going to be in their mind when thinking about the final selection process. So fake it until you make it. Then let's go into qualities to demonstrate during a technical interview. Wait, hold up. I believe. Okay, hold on. There we go. I thought I was skipping it. Okay, so then we're going to go into the soft skills approach. Throughout all of this, if you've noticed, a lot of this is based on communication. And communication is key, because we're not mind readers. You know what I'm saying? You have about an hour-long interview to be able to communicate about, well, on average, 6 to 12 years of experience. How do you do that? Well, essentially, this is where we're going to get into soft skills. The more security and fluidity that you expose throughout an interview, it's going to be able to demonstrate how well and how comfortable you feel with your own expertise. So being able to communicate that experience both clearly and concisely is ultimately what's going to ensure your success in any interview. Here are the main soft skills that I recommend reinforcing for any technical interview. Now, these aren't the typical soft skills that you might understand, but these are kind of very specific niche soft skills inside communication. So effective communication is going to be extremely important. Essentially, it's the ability to communicate your knowledge and experience at the same level of the person that you're talking to. So if you're talking to a recruiter who may or may not know that much technical aspects of your stack, being able to bring that to the same level as the recruiter and being able to explain that is going to be extremely important. Vice versa, if it's a stakeholder inside your company, you're also going to have to kind of moderate your language towards aligning yourselves with them. Okay, so that's going to be extremely important, because that shows a great level of expertise. Then nonverbal communication. This involves the way that you express your experience, which can include your posture, your facial expressions, the speech tone, the speed of your speech, and the inflections. Things like hand movements, things like the posture, things like smiling, or things like being able to joke around about your experience. It's going to be so important because it shows, well, this person feels comfortable. They feel comfortable and confident about their skills, and they have no problem demonstrating that. Now, this is extremely important because, well, it also creates a terrain. It creates an environment, okay? If you feel a little bit more natural while giving an interview, it's going to give the possibility of someone on the other side to be able to reciprocate. What I always tell my candidates is an interesting fact that I've learned about human interaction is when two people meet each other for the first time and one person puts an energy on the table, the other person is normally going to reciprocate because they have no reason not to reciprocate. Something I tell my candidates a lot. And the reason behind that is, well, everyone wants to feel comfortable. Everyone wants to be able to interact as who they are. You know what I'm saying? It's just, obviously, there's belief systems around the culture, belief systems around appropriate ways to act in a certain interview, but we're all human. You know, we all have we all have personalities and ways of speaking in our day-to-day lives, and we all feel most comfortable while we're speaking in a certain way. So this is where being able to bring that out in a very comfortable but also a professional way is going to be key to being able to make the other interviewer or the interviewer on the other side feel as comfortable as possible. And that is so important, not only for you, but also for the overall perception. Now, finally, we have emotional regulation. This is the ability to voluntarily regulate your emotions. And this part is crucial, especially in an interview scenario. There are so many psychological factors that are involved in you being able to express your experience comfortably. Some people have test anxiety. Some people have evaluation anxiety. Other people have different fears and different psychological factors that might interfere in how well or how fluidly they communicate their experience. Essentially, all of this and all of the preparation is going to help you regulate that emotion, okay? And in general, something that I always recommend my candidates is there's a before, a during, and an after, okay? In the before the interview, what you're going to want to do is obviously you're going to want to take all of this preparation in mind and do it thoroughly, but at least 6 to 12 hours before, what you're going to want to do is relax as much as possible. Do what makes you feel good, do what makes you feel empowered, do what makes you feel great. And there's a reason for this. There's an actual psychological real reason for this. There's a concept known as physical emotional activation, okay? Which is essentially based on the level of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And this stress hormone is going to be directly involved in how physically activated you are when, in a fight or flight response. In this case, it is going to be a fight response, okay? So there's an ideal level of stress. There's a level of stress that's too high in which you're going to be a little bit more anxious. You're going to be a little bit more, you're going to be moving your leg around probably and essentially feeling really activated. And then there's a level that's a little bit too low for stress, which is going to be, you're going to be extremely relaxed and you might not have that surge of energy that you need to be able to create, the environment that you want to. Now, there's an ideal level of stress in which you have that level of physical activation, but also it's not too much. You're not anxious. You're not going to be, extremely jiggity, for example. So that's extremely important because if you can control that by relaxing previously beforehand, before the interview, that is going to make all of the difference because it's naturally going to go a little bit higher. You're always going to be a little bit more stressed in the environment of a technical interview. It's natural because you're being evaluated. You have to, it's essentially a competition, and competitions mean, being able to put yourself out there. So emotional regulation is extremely important. Now, during the interview, obviously the idea is to go in with that nonverbal communication in which you feel comfortable and being able to obviously maintain that level of stress or physical activation in that mid or ideal standard point, okay? And then in the afterwards, you kind of apply those questions to be able to kind of close and ensure that level of rapport or that level of comfortability with the interviewer, and essentially you have the entire interview closed and on your side. So these three aspects of related to soft skills are going to be key. And then we go into qualities to demonstrate during a technical interview. I'm going to go through it's a huge list, so we'll talk about them individually. Technical competence. First and foremost, showcase your technical expertise. Being well prepared to answer questions related to job-specific technologies, programming languages, and tools relevant to the job is extremely important, as we've discussed before. Then problem-solving skills. This is where you're going to be able to expose, both in a hypothetical situation or in a coding assignment, essentially exposing your problem-solving skills. And as developers, as we might know, that's kind of the most crucial part of all of this. So technical interviews can often involve solving complex questions, complex problems, and demonstrating that ability to break those problems down, thinking critically, and coming up with effective solutions is going to be able to be extremely important, because you have to explain your thought process, essentially communicating, as I mentioned before. Communication, as I mentioned before, communicate your ideas through the thought process and the solutions clearly and effectively. Using concise language, maybe you want to use diagrams or different ways to be able to convey those points. So ensuring that the interviewer understands your approach. Adaptability, being open to adapt to your approach when faced with new information or challenges is going to be extremely important. We might create a strategy in which you have all of the selling points, you have different situations, but the situation can change. The interviewer might give you a question that you had never expected. And the idea of having all of this preparation beforehand means that you can easily adapt. You don't have to think about it in the last minute. You can easily adapt to the new situations. Being able to present that in the situation of an interview is going to be super important. Then coding style. If coding is involved, maintain a clean and organized coding style. Use meaningful variable names, follow the best practices, and comment your code as needed. Pay attention to efficiency and performance. I believe that most developers use a lot of comments and tags and notes in their code to be able to demonstrate or even facilitate documentation. So doing that in a technical interview is going to ensure and expose best practices. Then attention to detail. Demonstrate your attention to detail by avoiding common coding errors, spotting edge cases, or thoroughly testing your solutions. Small mistakes can be a red flag to interviewers. And this is something I've noticed a lot in the technical interviews that I've helped interview my candidates with. Normally, the feedback comes with tiny details that they might see in your code. They give the inference that you might not be as organized, or you might not have the best practices that you exposed or that you mentioned that you might have. So especially in coding, that's going to be extremely important. Okay. Then time management. Time management is so important, because managing your time wisely during the interview is not getting stuck on a single problem for too long, or not staying on a certain topic for too long as well. If you're stuck, consider asking for hints or moving on to another question or topic and revisiting the problem later. Then collaboration. If the interview involves teamwork or pair programming exercises, be a collaborative team player. Listen to your partner's ideas, provide constructive feedback, and work together to achieve the goal. Essentially, this is also demonstrating a key competency throughout your career, throughout essentially your time in a company. Being able to collaborate with your team members is going to be crucial to your development as a software developer or as a QA or an engineer in general. So that's going to be super important. Then domain knowledge. Showcase your understanding of the industry and domain that the company operates in. This demonstrates your ability to apply technical solutions within a specific context. So, as I mentioned before, that's going to be directly related to your ability to research the company previously. According to from what I understand based on my experience, your knowledge on the industry is going to be extremely important to the business knowledge that you apply in the solutions that you give. So keep that in mind. Then project experience. Discuss relevant projects from your past experience, highlight your contributions, challenges that you faced, and how you've overcome them. Mention the impact of your work on your project success. Extremely important. That's the box of highlights. Essentially keeping that portfolio of highlights, showcasing your abilities, what you did, how you fixed the problems is going to be so important in this case. Then continuous learning. This is one of the most important things, not only for interviewers, but in general for your career. Continuous learning is going to be so important, which is also directly related to adaptability. And expressing your commitment to ongoing learning and self-improvement, mentioning any recent courses, certifications, or workshops is going to demonstrate potential. Like I mentioned before, you might not have all of these skills, all of the experience that they're asking for in a specific job description. But by mentioning courses, certifications, workshops, intentions, alliances, you're going to be able to demonstrate the potential that you have to be able to easily adapt to learning one tech stack or another. So that's going to be super important. Then confidence. Believe in your problem solving skills, technical knowledge, and convey that confidence to the interviewer without appearing overly self-assured or boastful. Super, super important. The security that you project is going to create the perception of expertise, like I mentioned before. Curiosity. Express genuine curiosity about the company, the role, and the challenges it presents. Ask thoughtful questions, and that demonstrates your interest in the position. So in general here, I think curiosity is also directly related to how genuinely passionate you are about your job and about the interview and going into this position, because I feel like, in my experience, there's nothing more powerful than communicating passion, especially when creating the perception of both expertise and also viability. If you communicate how passionate you are about your job, I think it moves anyone. If you can, it's like an energy that gets conveyed through a screen or through an interview. It's so powerful, and curiosity is definitely one of those ways of being able to express that. So always stay curious. And these are, in general, the overall skills or competencies or qualities that we'd like to demonstrate. So finally, we have the questions and answers part.
Well, thank you so much, Franshezco. That was great. Very, very interesting. I like the part where you mentioned that the energy is very important too. So now is the time for you guys to leave your questions below. If you have any comments or questions, just leave them there. We will be answering them. I have one here, Franshezco. It is, how do you think a person can demonstrate that they have technical skills during an interview? I know you mentioned a little bit, well, you mentioned a lot of points about this, but how do you think it can summarize in one suggestion?
How you can demonstrate your skills? Well, I think a summary is it's a combination of the preparation and communication of it. Okay, being able to let's go back. This is what you do on your day to day. You know what I'm saying? This is your job. This isn't something new to you. So all you have to do is do what you've been doing the entire time, but being able to explain it in the most clear and concise way possible. I think that's the best way of being able to summarize that. The combination of the preparation, the communication, and also the acknowledgement of your day-to-day experience is probably the best way of expressing that you have that expertise in any single way possible.
Perfect. And here we have another one. We know that it's important to ask questions in interviews, but do you think there is a limit on how many questions it's good enough?
Okay. I mean, there's definitely a limit. I think a joke that I always give my candidates is you can ask them anything legitimately. You can go and ask them what they had for breakfast. And like I said, the inference that's going to create in their mind is, why is this person asking me about the breakfast that I had? I think there is definitely a limit, but ideally you have the questions preset beforehand and you go slowly adapting the questions to their answers and to the energy that you feel. It's not like you're going to go and just bombard them with a whole bunch of questions. What you're going to want to do is strategically bring in the questions according to the way that they respond, to the interest in which they respond, and essentially opening a new conversation. The idea of the general questions is creating a horizontal environment. You see, in the moment throughout the interview, there's a specific relationship, there's a dynamic in which the interviewer is at least hierarchically above you. But in the questions aspect, in the questions part, you're going to be on the same level. The idea is to be able to maintain that same level, to be able to maximize the rapport or the comfortability in the relationship. So being able to maintain that and playing strategically with your questions is important. And finally, how many questions is relevant? How many questions you can probably make? It depends on on the dynamic, on the energy that's flowing. If it's going really well, if they're responding, if there's a lot of smiling and stuff like that, you can ask as much as, I don't know, 6 or 7 questions. But obviously, if they're answering straight, or if they're answering with kind of medium-sized answers, you're going to want to stick to 3 or 4 questions.
Okay, great. And also, you mentioned that it's important to relax before an interview. What would be some other tips that you would give in order for people not to be so nervous in case they are?
It's because it's also going back to like realities of the situation. Like I said, this is a conversation. It's just a conversation between 2 people. Keeping that in mind is going to be the base of what you need to be able to lose the nervousness. Also, beforehand, the relaxing is also going hand to hand with the empowering yourselves. Dressing up in a certain way that makes you feel comfortable. For some people, wearing a nice jacket and and a good shirt is going to be empowering. For some people, for other people, wearing an entire suit, a 3-piece suit, is going to be a lot more empowering, and so on. This goes to overall perception, but also reminding yourself that you've been doing this for a long time, or you've been preparing yourself, or you've developed yourself in this way. Acknowledging that and validating yourself is going to be extremely important to feeling less nervous. Also, as far as relaxing goes, what I typically do is, I might study 12 hours beforehand, and then, throughout the day, I'll just, keeping this empowerment in mind, I'll remind myself, it's fine. You know what I'm saying? Just rest. You have it. You got this. We're going to kill it when we get there. But for now, take a hot shower, take a run, read a book, play with your dog, do whatever makes you feel great, because that's going to be extremely important in making you, not only feel relaxed, but also validating your experience that you're ready. Essentially, by relaxing and not thinking about this, you're validating the fact that you are ready. You're competent. You can do this. And you have everything that you need. So, yeah.
Perfect. And here, Nilam is asking, would there be any questions about what I did and did not put in my resume?
CVs. Okay, there might be. Now, playing around with CVs is extremely important because you're going to want to calibrate it directly to the job description. Also, there's going to be like a list of responsibilities in tech stack. So making sure that at least that tech stack as a minimum is included in your CV, in your experience, in the functions that you've done, is extremely important. Now, as far as responsibilities goes, the responsibilities in the tech stack or in the job description that they've mentioned, you're going to want to include that specifically in the functions that you've done, in the achievements that you've had throughout the time that you've had in your companies. So they might ask specific questions, yeah, but also having this specific toolkit in hand, the technical aspects, is going to be so important.
Okay, thank you. And here's one last question. This is a little bit more about you. We want to know, well, we know that Encora has won different awards, like Great Place to Work in different countries, including Peru, where you are from. And we want to know, how do you feel about working at Encora?
Honestly, working at Encora has been really interesting. Being super clear, this is one of my first job experiences, and this is my first job experience in the technology sector. It's one of the more competitive sectors out there, and it's fast paced. It's very heartwarming because of the amount of specificities of technology that there's in, but also the difference in the overall work culture. Technology, or at least the tech sector, has evolved to a point in which the minimum standard is offering a great work culture, a great, environment to be able to work in, with the facilities to be able to just concentrate on your work. So as far as Encora goes, they've been able to ensure both that minimum standard and so much more. And I'm super thankful for having worked here, and also for having met so many people, so many great engineers, so many great professionals throughout my time.
Okay, thank you so much, Franshezco. Everything was great. Your information is very valuable. I know everyone appreciated it. And now it's time to say goodbye. before that, I want to say that you're all invited to our website, EncoraJobs.com. We're always looking for new Encorians, so make sure you check that out. Also, follow us on social media. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as Encora Jobs, and on LinkedIn as Encora Inc. Be sure to check our social media because we're always doing webinars. And thank you again, Franshezco, and until next time.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye-bye.